One of the most underrated players of the 2000s, and just 21st century in general, is Paul Pierce. Now, why he's underrated? It's kind of his own fault. As you guys know, Pierce, he thinks very, very highly of himself and puts himself in an upper echelon of NBA greats. And very recently, he had some comments regarding Dwyane Wade being compared to him. And as you can imagine, Paul Pierce thinks he's better as well as greater than D. Wade. And these comparisons by Pierce, they started back in 2019, actually on ESPN, where Pierce said flat out he had a better and more impressive career than Dwyane. And look, Pierce had a great career, Hall of Fame career, top 75 all time. But we're talking about Dwyane Wade, a guy who's top 25 all time, and in many regard, the third best shooting guard in NBA history. And compared to Pierce, he has 2 more championships, more All-Star selections, All-NBA teams, all defensive teams, as well as scoring titles. And those accolades by Wade are definitely highly impressive. But looking at actual play on the court, versus Paul Pierce the player, he outplayed him every single time they met. As against Pierce, he averaged 25.4 points, 5.5 boards, 5.1 assists, nearly 2 steals, and 1 block. And many forget the only time Paul Pierce beat Dwyane Wade in a series was back in 2010. But Wade in that series still averaged 33 points on nearly 60% shooting. And in 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014, Paul Pierce was beat and outplayed by Dwyane Wade. And one thing Paul said that caught my eye was saying his skills are underappreciated because he didn't play with a lot of great players like Dwyane Wade. And look, he's half right, half wrong. Because Pierce's overall skills, his step back jumper, clutch time play, it's actually pretty underrated as was underappreciated. But Pierce being underrated, being undervalued, doesn't by default make him better or greater than Dwyane Wade. And when it comes to Wade's career, many forget after Shaq, before LeBron, there was a 2-3 year period with Dwyane Wade, he was going crazy and debatably a top 3 player in the NBA. As in 2009, he averaged 30.2 points per game, the highest of his career, the most in the NBA, 7.5 assists, 5.0 boards, 2.2 steals, and 1.3 blocks. And for his Heat team that was piss poor, he was the leader in every category except rebounds. And staying with 09 Wade and his stats, compared to Paul Pierce and his career highs, 09 Wade still beats Pierce every day of the week. As for Pierce's career, his highest scoring average was 26.8, highest assist average 5.1, highest steals average 2.2, and highest block average 1.0. Dwyane Wade in 2009, simply put, is better than any version of Paul Pierce. And if you watched basketball back then in the mid-2000s, early 2010s, everyone knew Paul Pierce, he was a very good player. But nobody in their right mind said Paul Pierce was better than Dwyane Wade. And one thing Pierce truly believes is that if he had Chris Bosh, LeBron James, he would have been just as good and great as Dwyane. And look, if you put Pierce on those teams with Bosh and LeBron, they'd probably win 1 championship, maybe 2. But that hypothetical, that argument, that doesn't make Pierce better or greater than Wade. And he's grasping at straws so much, he's going to hypothetical arguments, what ifs, and things you can't really prove. The only real fact Paul Pierce brings up for him being better than Wade is 3-point shooting. Okay, 3-point shooting is important, but Dwyane Wade was the better scorer, defender, passer, and again, player in general. And Pierce tries to imply that he was a better scorer than Wade because he scored in the post, the mid-range, and shoot the 3. Again, Paul Pierce, he could do all that, but him having those skills doesn't make him better scorer than Dwyane Wade. As looking at peak Wade in the playoffs, from 05 to 2011, he was a top 5 scorer in the NBA on great shooting, averaging 27.3 points on 49%. If you take peak Paul Pierce in the playoffs, 01 to 07, roughly the same time period, he averaged 24.5 points, which is still very impressive, on below average 40.9% shooting. And funny to me, Paul Pierce's 3-point shooting actually is lower than Dwyane Wade in his prime in the playoffs. And Pierce, before Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, that Big Three era, he made one East Finals and never made the NBA Finals, compared to Wade in 06, who won the entire championship, 05 made the East Finals, and 2011 again, the NBA Finals as the best player. The most overlooked aspect of Dwyane Wade's game is he was giving you 28-30 points while playing great defense. And looking at clutch time scoring in 2009, with peak Dwyane Wade, he was the NBA's leader at 4.4 points, ahead of LeBron James, as well as Kobe. And for 09, he was 3rd MVP, 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year, 1st team All-NBA, 2nd team All-Defense, and the scoring title champ. I don't care what way you slice it, Paul Pierce is never better than 2009 Dwyane Wade. Now, looking past Paul Pierce and his awful takes about Wade, you have Jeff Teague, who also had some terrible Dwyane Wade takes, as Teague had the audacity, the gall, to say James Harden in his prime was better than Dwyane Wade. And look, just like with Paul Pierce, James Harden, he's a great player and eventually will be a Hall of Famer. And the stats he put up looking back on them, they are pretty outlandish. As from 2016 to 2020, he not once averaged less than 29 a game. And for 3 straight years, averaged 30 points and won the scoring title. And he peaked out, averaging 34 and 36 points a game. Regardless of what you think of James Harden, those Houston offenses, that is pretty darn impressive. But when it comes to Dwyane Wade, the all-time great players, top 15, top 20, what makes those guys different is in the playoffs, they elevated their game and got better. And comparing prime Wade versus prime Harden, the playoff stats are pretty comparable. But what I'll point out is Dwyane Wade's era from 05 to 2011 defensively was much tougher. And unlike James Harden, he didn't have an entire offense catered to him, his skills, and his 3-point shooting. And despite that, still averaged 27 points per game, nearly as much as James Harden, on much better shooting. And looking at the efficiency gap, Dwyane Wade shooting nearly 50% compared to Harden, who's in the low 40s. That's a pretty big gap. But an even bigger gap is the defensive gap, which no one talks about. I think Dwyane Wade is a better offensive player than James Harden. Is it close? Yeah, it's pretty close. But defensively, it's a no contest, no question, and there's no debate. And looking at peak Dwyane Wade at his absolute best, in the 06 Finals, he did what James Harden not once has done on really any big-time stage. As for that series, he averaged 34.7 points in 4 straight games, scored 42, 36, 43, and 36 again. And looking at his 2 best teammates, you had Antoine Walker as well as Shaq. Those 2 players of the Heat were the only guys in double figures outside of Dwyane Wade. And Antoine shot below 40%. And looking at all of NBA history, for a Finals MVP, Dwyane's scoring average ranks 8th all time. And in comparison to Harden, by averaging 34.7 points, that is a higher average than all but one James Harden series. And post-2010 Dwyane Wade, he was still a top 5 player for at least a little bit. And in 2011, took a big step back offensively to share with LeBron James, as well as Chris Bosh. Now, despite taking that step back in the playoffs, I would argue Wade was Miami's best player en route to the finals. As for the entire playoffs, he averaged 24.5 points, leading the team on 48% shooting. And versus Boston, who they did beat 4-1, Wade in that series was the team's leading scorer. And of course, versus Dallas, once again led the Heat in scoring and was their best player. And if certain guys showed up, Dwyane Wade very easily has 4 championships and 2 Finals MVPs. My overall point being, Wade in 06, 09, 2011, he's better than any version of James Harden you can possibly find. As once again, Harden is a great player and an iconic player for this generation. But compared to the top tier Hall of Famers, what holds Harden back is his playoff blunders. And to bring the cold hard facts, looking at prime Dwyane Wade, 05 to 2011, in elimination games, he averaged 30 points, 5.9 assists, 5.5 boards on 44% shooting. Compared to prime James Harden from 2015 to 2020, who averaged 27 a game, 6 assists, 6 boards on 41% shooting. And out of those games, Harden had 5 games under 30% shooting. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.